What's up, everyone? This is Raleigh Williams. I am excited to talk to y'all a little bit about how to increase the value of your business. We're going to try this new little layout. We'll see if this is effective or not. My worry is that you got too much that you can look at, but we'll see if it works. So, first of all, for those of you who know me a little bit less, I want to go over who I am, and then we'll get into the way that you can double the size of your business in the next 4 months with that while working half the amount of time. Sound good? So I am Raleigh Williams. I started as a merger and acquisition lawyer in New York City. I went to University of Chicago for law school, and then I ended up working at Skadden Arps right here, the #2 merger and acquisition firm. And so I was able to see how the smartest guys in business do their business and how the biggest players in the world think about growing big businesses and been able to apply that into smaller businesses. Everyone always asks if it is anything like Suits, the TV show. And I usually say that if Suits looks anything like this, just piles of paper and a desk with spreadsheets and 750-page contracts, then it was exactly like Suits. And so I ended up quitting in 2016 and left, and I built a family entertainment business that we've sold the majority stake in for 26 million, and that's required us to do it in 6 different exits. So I've been through the full business cycle on a business of starting it, scaling it, running through scaling issues, getting to the exit, and now I'm the CEO of Fierce Athletica, which is a women's weight loss confidence brand that I do with my wife, and then acquisition scaling, where we help people find acquisitions to bolt on or tuck into their business. And so I wanted to show you, that's me in a nutshell. And so I want to show you how to double the size of your business in 4 months while working half the amount of time. And the first time I was ever exposed to this concept, outside of being a lawyer and doing it for clients, when I actually ran into it myself, is I was trying to sell one of my trampoline parks, and there was an operator, a trampoline park operator that was way, way bigger than me. And so I was doing about $1 million a year in that trampoline park. And he goes, what do you want for it? And I said, I think it's worth about $4 million, because usually trampoline parks have a 4x multiple, and I was making about $1 million a year. And he said, you want me to teach you something that changed the way that I look at business? I said, sure. And he said, you couldn't pay me $4 million to take over your business. I said, how is that possible? I'm making $1 million a year. You're saying that, and I want you to pay me $4 million, and you're saying I can't pay you $4 million a year to take over this business? And he said, what you're not thinking about is the enterprise value that I'm working off of. Because he was a trampoline park operator and he had built a franchise system. So he was getting valued as a franchisor, which is like a 12x multiple. And he knew that if he took on my $1 million of earnings into his business and he had to operate that business, he would then have new revenue, new profitability of $1 million, but that profitability would be valued at 4x. So it could potentially change the entire multiple of his business. So even though he would add a new $1 million of profitability to his business, it could make him look like a completely different thing when he tries to sell it. So he was no longer a franchisor getting a 12x multiple. He was an owner operator of brick and mortar location, which is usually a 4x multiple. So that $1 million of new profit could have cost him, a massive change in the way that he was valued. And he had been in business for a lot longer than me. He had done a lot of huge exits. And what you'll find the longer that you're in business is that the people that are at the top that are doing public transactions and 9-figure exits and all those things, right? They focus less and less. Revenue is important. Profitability is obviously important if you're trying to run a lifestyle business. But once you get serious about building something that has sustainability, that you can attract the best talent, because the best talent wants to be in something that's growing and that feels big and that has the opportunity to be big so they can have a part in it. All of those entrepreneurs focus on enterprise value, what is my earnings, what am I getting valued at from a multiple standpoint, and how can I grow those two things as quickly as possible. And there's a reason why you don't hear about enterprise value a ton in private business outside, unless you're doing deals with venture capital or private equity. If you have a deal with any of those guys, in every presentation I've ever been in with a private equity partner, you always have to have at least one slide that's talking about enterprise value, potential acquisitions, and potential targets, right? Because that's one of the quickest ways to grow enterprise value. And you don't hear about it a lot because kind of the way that in the public markets enterprise value is talked about is your market cap plus your market value of debt minus your cash and your cash equivalents. Everyone kind of knows in their business what their debt is, they know what their cash is, but market capitalization, which is usually like the number of shares outstanding times the price that those shares are trading at, this is a huge part of valuing enterprise value typically in a public business, but you don't really know what your shares are worth until you try to go sell them. And so it's kind of circular. And so it's a bad definition. So the way that I talk about enterprise value is basically what someone will pay you to buy your entire business. So we're getting closer. Okay, so it's what my business is worth to a third party. How am I supposed to know that? One question is the way that you're getting valued is usually how reliable, consistent, and capital intensive it is to generate growth in the business. So the reason why me as a trampoline park operator was going to get a 4x multiple on my brick and mortar business versus a franchisor that was going to get a 12x multiple is because when someone buys my business and they decide that they want to grow it, the way that they have to grow it is they have to go out and they have to find a new abandoned warehouse or grocery store. They have to put $2.5 million into it. And then they have to operate it at a loss for a long time. And then they break even and then they can start making money. So every additional unit to add on to my brick and mortar business is very capital intensive. It takes a lot of money to keep growing it, which is why you get a lower multiple of what you're making. So if I was making $1 million a year, I get $4 million a year versus a franchisor system where if you have a franchise system and you sell an additional franchisee on joining the system, it costs you almost nothing because they're funding it. I mean, it costs you the money to go and find those franchisees, but they're paying you an upfront fee of usually $50,000 to $100,000 upfront, and then they fund the build. And so they've built a franchise system. The reason why this guy had a better business than I did and was getting valued that way is because for a franchise system to grow, it's not capital intensive, right? You can keep growing revenue and you can keep growing profitability, and you don't have like this massive amount of capital that's tied up in doing that. That's why SaaS products, software as a service products, get valued at 20, 30, 50 times versus Amazon, product business. If I have an Amazon product business, in order to grow it, I have to grow my inventory in order to be able to sell things. And so that tends to put downward pressure on what my multiple is versus software as a service. And then within software as a service, there's different types of, things that have really high multiples and really low. And typically the multiple is a reflection of how capital intensive it is to get new growth in the business. And then the consistency of it, which is driven a lot of by the types of revenue. And those are all different things that we can get into. But I just wanted to give you a high level of what enterprise value is coming up and how to grow that number in your business. And there's an equation that I work off of that I've kind of cobbled together from different places. And it's basically another thing to think about with enterprise value is the speed, which is the innovation in your business times the velocity. Innovation, I define as basically your creativity times your distribution times your execution. And so as you're looking at new products, how creative are they? How easily will it be for you to distribute it? And can you actually execute on it? And then times the velocity, which you get a square root power of, which is your ability to capture new demand over the amount of time that it takes you to do it. And it's this velocity that you'll see as we get into acquisitions and the way that acquisitions can grow enterprise value it's the velocity of acquisitions that really makes it so much more preferable over anything else, because the amount of time, because once you actually get the transaction done, it speeds everything up so much faster because of this velocity equation, because not that much time passes and you're capturing this whole new piece of demand that you weren't previously capturing, and you didn't have to go out and build it. And I'm going to do a whole different video on demand capture and how that's like some other things, but this is just high level. So the best way, I want to talk to you about the 3 ways that the best companies in the world build enterprise value. So we've kind of talked about why no one really talks about enterprise value in private companies, because it's hard to value. And we've also talked about how you can start thinking about growing enterprise value just in what you're doing, even if you never make any acquisitions or never look at anything else, right? What are the ways that you can start building your business that one day a potential buyer can see, I can continue to grow this with the least amount of capital possible and the least amount of work possible. And those are ways that you can grow your enterprise value. So now we're going to get into the bulk of it. And so there's an interesting quote when Mark Zuckerberg was thinking about buying Instagram, and there was a board meeting. Facebook had been around for 6 or 7 years, and they were capturing this piece of demand of, kind of like a college thing where you could see what other college people look like and all that stuff. And then you have Instagram, kind of this new up and comer that's not directly competing with them at all. Instagram wasn't going after the college people. It was like a photo app for taking pictures. But what Zuckerberg said is, what we're really buying is time. One way of looking at this is we're really buying time. Even if some new competitor springs up, buying Instagram, Path, Foursquare will give us a year or more to integrate their dynamics before anyone can get close to their scale again. With that time, if we incorporate the social mechanics they were using, those new products won't get much traction since we already have their mechanics deployed at scale. And if you read that email exchange back and forth, some members of the board said, some acquisitions end up kind of being a waste of time because it's an entrepreneur who, is trying to buy growth instead of building it himself. Everyone had an opinion. They obviously ended up doing it. They bought Instagram for $1 billion. Today it's worth $102 billion if Instagram were to spin out and be its own thing. So it ended up being a good transaction for them. And so I think that enterprise value is best grown and most quickly grown through acquisitions. Most entrepreneurs, when they hear acquisitions, their mind shuts down and that feels hard, that feels expensive, that feels like I'm not big enough yet, that feels like what the biggest guys do that I can't do because I don't know how to. And I really want to break it down for you over the 4 types of acquisitions. One of them isn't really an acquisition, but it's something that once you just get into the habit of looking at businesses that are for sale, you can use this 4th tactic as a way to capture new demand without ever spending any money out of pocket and doing it with your internal team. So most people think of acquisitions in their head. They think of these platform acquisitions, which are these big transactions, because usually a platform is, I'm going to buy this new business and it's substantial enough. It's got an operating team. Usually it requires debt. And so I'm going to leave platform acquisitions off to the side because it's typically what people think about with acquisitions. And it's a little bit more complicated and it's a little bit harder to do. These other 3, though, I want to talk to you about, which is when you do a bolt-on acquisition. So bolt-on, which is here, we'll talk about this last, but I drew it different. A bolt-on is basically what Facebook did with Instagram. A bolt-on is you're the platform and you're bolting on a new business that is going to exist and is synergistic with the platform that you've built. And so if you have a marketing agency, a bolt-on acquisition could be a lot of things. It could be a smaller agency that continues to operate on its own, but you're just going to be 2 separate things. And no one else on the outside world needs to know that y'all own each other, but you can send each other business and it's synergistic. A bolt-on could also be if you're a marketing agency and you want to buy e-com business because you know that you're going to be able to drive all the marketing for that e-com business. You bolt that on to your business and you continue to operate that, and there's synergies there. There's basically, you're looking at these businesses and you're saying they're selling for this, but they don't know that I have this special sauce that I can bring to this I can drive value out of this better than anybody else. So those are bolt-on acquisitions. The third, which is my favorite to start, is these tuck-ins. And a tuck-in is right here. So I own this business, Fierce Athletica, and I look at businesses for sale every single week. And there was a business that came up. There was an app that was for sale, and they wanted $120,000 to acquire the app. And so that would have been something that would have been like a bolt-on transaction. And that's kind of what they were valuing. They said, we have all these users, we've spent all this money developing this thing, we think this is so great, and we want 120 grand for it. So I called the owner, I talked to the owner, and I said, I don't really want to buy, I don't need to buy your entire thing. So tell me a little bit about why you're getting to the $120,000. And he said, well, all of these users are supposed to renew in January, so that should be $40,000 of value just in revenue. We've developed this brand. This brand is really important to us. We think this can really be a big thing. And so what I did, so that would have been a bolt-on transaction where I say, I own Fierce, you own this other thing. I'm going to bolt this on, and we're going to operate these two things separate. I said, but instead, I structured it as a tuck-in instead of a bolt-on. And I said, how about you keep all those users for that $40,000 that I'm not sure you're going to get, and I'm definitely not wanting to pay for it on the front end. How about instead of me buying you and I take your brand and all of this other stuff, why don't you give me basically a copy and paste version of your app? Let me brand it myself. And instead of paying you $120,000, how about I pay you $10,000 to copy and paste your app, get it live on the App Store for me, and rebrand it for my own stuff, and then I can have an app for myself. So instead of a bolt-on of I'm taking your stuff, I did a tuck-in where I don't want everything that you're trying to sell me. There's a little piece of it that I want, and I think that it's best for both of us because I want this piece, and then you can still go out and try to sell your thing. And so I'm just giving you gravy on top of what you're trying to sell me. And I internally knew that if I were to try to develop my own app, because I've had this quoted out 10,000 times, it would be $100,000. It would take me 6 months of wireframing and dealing with developers and designers and all this stuff. And so instead of doing the bolt-on transaction, I opted for a tuck-in transaction. A tuck-in is basically where you're either taking pieces of the target or you're doing a full target acquisition and you're just bringing it inside and you're running it in-house with your internal team, and you can kind of acquire the whole team. But basically the way that I like to do tuck-ins is I don't want to buy your whole business. There's just a couple organs that I want out of it to put into mine. And those tend to be the cheapest and fastest way to get acquisitions going to get started. The fourth way is DIY, and this is probably how you've been growing thus far. And this is, we call these greenfield opportunities. Usually a greenfield is some area in your business that you feel like if you push on building a new product, you can capture new demand that you haven't been able to capture thus far. And what I want to try to convince you of is that just going through the process of looking through new businesses that are for sale within the niche that you're already in, just going through that process will be a better way for you to find new greenfield opportunities, even if you never acquire anything ever. And I have an example of that where I was looking at a business. It was called, I can't tell you because I signed an NDA on it. So I was looking at it. They wanted $2.5 million. I saw that they were doing about 150 grand a month. And I signed the NDA, but then I started getting into the product. And I thought that it was a really cool layout. I thought that it was something cool that I really did want in my business. And I went through the process of trying to do the bolt-on transaction. And then once I got into the financials, I'm going to do another video on financials and how the financial story has to make sense. But once I started getting into the financials, I started to see that I just couldn't really trust paying for what they were asking for But I really, really liked the model. I really, really liked how they built everything. And I could tell the nice thing was from a demand capture, they proved to me that the way that they were going about doing their model was capturing new demand that I wanted in my business. So instead of buying it, I decided to greenfield it, and I decided to basically take it to developers and say, high level, this is directionally where I want to go. I'm going to make it my own, and I'm going to not infringe on any NDA or non-competition that I've signed with these guys. But this is something that I would really like, and so I didn't have to. I didn't have to spend time trying to get a creative idea on how to generate a new product to increase my speed, just by the fact that I was looking at new businesses on a daily basis and in that cadence with the intent to buy some, or learning the way to go about the acquisition. I had to spend zero time on creative because they had done it all for me. They had proved to me that the distribution was there if I could mimic it. And the execution was a risk of mine that I was willing to take because I could do it for cheaper than the 2.5 million. And also, I knew that there was new demand capture and the time was completely compressed because they had kind of shown me the whole model. And I decided to greenfield it. And I call this model mimicking, where you see something because you're looking at acquisitions and you say, I think that you're completely overpriced. And if the seller's not willing to do anything with it, you say, I'm an entrepreneur. The nice thing about us as entrepreneurs versus private equity is we're willing to kind of do the work and bring it all in-house ourselves, as opposed to a lot of financial buyers that just have no idea how to operate or execute, and they only want to pay money for the speed. And so I ended up implementing this in my business, and it has this right here. It's been really good. I can't tell you exactly how good, but I can tell you that it's been very good. And I would have never thought to execute this, or I would have never had the confidence to push through the innovation struggle of building it had I not seen the end of the story of a business who had already done it. This is something that if you can build it, there's demand out there. And if you can just capture the demand, it'll be in your best interest to do it. And so that is the 4 ways that you can start thinking about acquisitions, and acquisitions as a way to drive enterprise value in your business. Just going through the process of looking at businesses, right? It will increase your speed. It'll increase your speed tremendously because you can see what it looks like for businesses that are for sale. And all it takes is it takes one acquisition. You have to understand that when you're looking at new businesses and when you're trying to grow enterprise value this way, you're whale hunting, not doing little minnows. And so it'll be a lot of non-progress, but it just takes one. It just takes one new idea, one acquisition that you're bringing in-house, or one new idea that you decide to model mimic that you wouldn't have done before, that can completely change the trajectory of your business and the speed at which you are growing. And it's something that me as a CEO, and the best CEOs that I have ever been around, from Skadden and Arps, the other law firms that I was at, selling businesses, all of these CEOs and all of these private equity guys, right? You're doing the work of operating your business, but you also, right? That's kind of like the farming aspect of like, yeah, we're going to try to get another 3% this year. We're going to grow 10%. All that's great. But then there's another aspect that you should be allocating into your time as the owner of your business that is spent looking at new business acquisitions, because that's the hunting portion of your job. And that's the way that you can have 50% growth, 75% growth, 120% growth. And you're doing both. You're doing both at the same time. And they even that process is synergistic of when you're thinking about how to iterate and how to move to the next piece to capture new demand in the business. You say, well, I saw this business 3 weeks ago that they were doing something kind of interesting. I don't really want to buy them, but I had no idea that, for me in the health and wellness business, I had no idea that food blogs were as profitable as that. So I don't really want to pay what they're asking for, but that gives me more confidence that my inclination of maybe we should start a food blog, it can be really good. Or the opposite can be true, where you say, I've always wanted to do a food blog until I saw the P&L, the profit and loss statement of a food blog, and it turns out food blogs are shit, and I don't want to do it. And so it's helping you get a landscape of where is demand, how profitable these other business verticals are, and what you need to bring in to your business. And so that is my little deal on enterprise value. If you think this is interesting, I want you to join my free Facebook group, Acquisition Scaling Premium Buyers Group. I'm going to be doing more and more trainings like this, kind of helping people understand the power of acquisitions. And it's something that I've done in both professionally as an M&A lawyer, and I think that most entrepreneurs get intimidated by this idea because it's not something that they hear a lot about. And once you get past that and you get into just like looking at businesses and feeling comfortable and looking at other businesses, even if you never do an acquisition, it helps you thinking about your exit, how you're valued. And I bet once you get into it and you start looking at one business a week, one business a month, you'll find one that you say, this could give me 30% growth in my business if I implement it well. And so I want to do that. So go on to Facebook, look at this Acquisition Scaling Premium Buyers Group. It's free. Get added, and it's a new group, so there's not a ton of people in there, but we're going to make it huge. And that is my little deal. Hopefully it was helpful. Peace.